The town of Eden, North Carolina, was quiet that December morning in 2001, the kind of small town stillness that makes even the softest footsteps sound loud. Michelle Hundley Smith kissed her children goodbye, promising she'd be back soon, her shopping trip just a routine errand like any other. The sky was gray, clouds hanging low, threatening snow that would never come that day. She stepped out into the chill, locking the door behind her, a simple gesture of security, of ordinary life, a life that would be forever disrupted. She never returned. No ransom notes. No frantic phone calls. No cryptic messages left behind. Just silence. The kind of silence that swells in a house until it becomes unbearable, pressing against the walls, the floors, the very air her children breathe. For the Smith family, the day began like any other but ended with a void that would never be filled, at least not for decades. From the moment the police were called, the search began in earnest. Officers scoured the neighborhood, knocked on doors, and canvassed nearby stores. Friends and family joined, desperate for answers. But every lead seemed to dissolve into nothing. Michelle's car was found in the parking lot of the grocery store she had visited, groceries untouched inside, her wallet and keys still in her purse. There was no evidence of a struggle. No footprints leading away. The trail vanished as abruptly as she had. Her children, young and confused, were left in a state of limbo between hope and despair. The oldest, just 13 at the time, tried to make sense of a mother who had simply disappeared. The younger ones, still clinging to childhood innocence, could only wait, watch, and wonder. Maybe she'll come back tomorrow, they told themselves, night after night, each day blending into the next. The community, initially buzzing with concern, slowly shifted into hushed speculation. Rumors swirled like autumn leaves in the streets. Had she run away? Had someone taken her? The whispers were merciless, the kind that only small towns can generate, blending concern and accusation in equal measure. Every neighbor became a suspect in someone's imagination. Every stranger passing through Eden was eyed with suspicion. The police followed every potential lead. They interviewed friends, relatives, even distant acquaintances. They scoured local hospitals, homeless shelters, and jails. They ran her name through databases and scanned surveillance footage, though in 2001, surveillance cameras were far from ubiquitous. Weeks turned into months, months into years. Each lead fizzled, leaving investigators frustrated and exhausted. Files piled up on desks, gathering dust, a quiet testament to failure and uncertainty. Michelle Hundley Smith's name became one among many in the cold case archives. For her children, the absence was more than physical. Birthdays, graduations, holidays, every milestone passed without the woman who should have been at the center of it all. Their lives were punctuated by empty chairs at the dinner table, birthday cakes missing the warmth of a mother's smile, and quiet Christmas mornings that felt hollow. Questions went unanswered. Where was she? Was she alive? Did she want to be found? The not knowing became a constant companion, a shadow over every triumph and tragedy in their lives. Psychologists would later note that the effects of a parent disappearing can be devastating. Children often internalize blame, imagining they must have done something wrong. They grow up with a distorted sense of reality, a constant tension between hope and grief. For the Smith children, those formative years were marked by a fragile resilience, but one that carried scars invisible to outsiders. And yet, despite the emotional toll, life in Eden continued. People went about their routines. Shops opened and closed. Snow fell and melted. And somewhere in the midst of this ordinary existence, the case of Michelle Hundley Smith remained a haunting reminder that life can change in an instant. In 2005, the first significant lead emerged. An anonymous tip suggested that Michelle might have been seen in a neighboring town, appearing to live under a different name. Police investigators followed the tip, contacting local businesses, checking rental records, and interviewing residents who fit the vague descriptions. Nothing concrete surfaced. It was a mirage, a fleeting glimpse of hope that evaporated as quickly as it appeared. By 2010, 2 decades of her children's lives had already passed with only whispers of a mother who might never return. The eldest had grown into adulthood, carrying the weight of her disappearance like an invisible chain. The youngest, now a teenager, had learned to navigate life with the absence embedded in their very identity. Family holidays became exercises in resilience rather than celebration. Parents who tried to support the children were faced with the impossible task of offering comfort without answers. And then came the subtle moments that seemed trivial at the time but would later take on an eerie significance. An unfamiliar woman at a local supermarket, a fleeting glance from a stranger who bore a resemblance to Michelle, phone calls from numbers that went unanswered, all became fragments of obsession, pieces of a puzzle that refused to form a coherent picture. The mind clings to these fragments, constructing scenarios that teeter between hope and despair. Meanwhile, the police files continued to grow. Photos were taken from Michelle's home, from family albums, from public records. Composite sketches were created. News reports occasionally revisited the case, keeping the story alive, though often only briefly. For the investigators, it was a delicate balance between professional duty and personal frustration. Each unsolved case chips away at one's confidence, leaving behind the weight of human suffering that seems impossible to resolve. The town itself became complicit in the mystery. Neighbors whispered, some with sympathy, some with suspicion. The story of the mother who vanished became a kind of folklore, a cautionary tale that parents told children, always be careful. People can disappear when you least expect it. The collective imagination of Eden wove Michelle's absence into the town's identity, a scar that would take years to fade. Her children, now teenagers, sought normalcy wherever they could find it. School, sports, friendships, all provided temporary respite from the gnawing void of maternal absence. Yet every milestone brought the question, would she ever return? And more painfully, had she chosen to leave them? The human need for closure is relentless, and when closure is denied, it manifests in anxiety, anger, and unresolved grief. Throughout this time, the theory of voluntary disappearance lingered. While rare, there are documented cases where adults choose to vanish, often to escape personal turmoil, financial strain, or emotional entanglements. But the longer the disappearance lasts, the more extreme the consequences. Families fractured, communities speculated, and the absent person becomes a ghost, living, yet untouchable. In 2015, a new forensic technique offered a glimmer of hope: DNA genealogy. Used to solve cold cases, it allowed investigators to trace familial connections across databases, often providing leads where traditional methods failed. Police reviewed Michelle's case, considering whether this technology might finally yield results. Yet the trail remained cold. Every lead suggested possibility, but nothing tangible. The case, once filled with immediate urgency, had become a monument to patience, persistence, and the inexorable passage of time. Meanwhile, her children were now adults, their memories of childhood interwoven with absence. The eldest had started a family of their own, each birthday party a bittersweet reminder of the mother who had vanished. The youngest, preparing to graduate, struggled with the gap left in their life story, the missing chapters that no amount of conversation could fill. Psychologists note that long-term parental absence affects attachment, trust, and emotional stability. The Smith children experienced these effects firsthand, navigating life with resilience forged in the crucible of uncertainty. In the background, the town of Eden continued its rhythms. The grocery store where Michelle was last seen remained, now under new ownership. Streets were paved and repaved. Children grew up and left, only to return with their own children. And yet, the story of the missing mother persisted, circulating through memory, rumor, and news archives. By the early 2020s, advances in technology and investigative methods began to breathe new life into old cold cases. Police departments collaborated with federal databases, leveraging social media, surveillance footage, and genetic analysis in ways previously unimaginable. It was in this era that the case of Michelle Hundley Smith was quietly revisited, the files dusted off, the investigators' resolve rekindled. And then, In February 2026, after nearly a quarter century of absence, the breakthrough came. Authorities located Michelle, alive, living quietly in a small town in North Carolina, just a few hours' drive from Eden. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, the media, and most importantly, her family. The children, now grown, were confronted with a reality that defied their expectations: their mother was alive. The reunion, when it finally happened, was a collision of emotions. Joy, disbelief, anger, and confusion intertwined in a whirlwind of feelings that no human language can fully capture. Questions that had haunted them for decades. Why did you leave? Were you ever in danger? Did you think of us? Poured out in a torrent of longing and accusation. For Michelle, the answers were complex, layered with fear, regret, and the consequences of her own choices. Even as she returned, the story was far from complete. Families who endure such separations must navigate the delicate dance of reconciliation, trust building, and the reshaping of relationships. Psychologists note that voluntary long-term absence creates a unique trauma, one that cannot be erased by mere presence. Healing is possible, but it is gradual, fragile, and often nonlinear. And so, the tale of Michelle Hundley Smith, the mother who vanished for 24 years, remains a story of mystery, human resilience, and the unyielding passage of time. It is a reminder that life can change in a heartbeat, that absence leaves scars unseen, and that the human heart clings to hope even in the darkest of times. But even alive, the questions remain. Why did she leave? And what secrets were kept in silence for 24 years? February 2026 felt surreal to the Smith family. After 24 years of unanswered questions and quiet suffering, the impossible had happened. Michelle Hundley Smith was alive. Authorities had located her in a modest home not far from Eden, living under her own name but with a life that had been carefully shielded from the world. For some, the very thought that she had survived all those years brought relief. For others, it was a shock so profound that it felt almost unreal. When the family first arrived at the scene, the air was thick with tension. The grown children, now adults hardened by decades of uncertainty, struggled to reconcile the mother they had mourned with the woman who now stood before them. Time had changed her. Not dramatically, but subtly. Lines of age and experience traced her face. Her eyes, once familiar and comforting, now held a guarded intensity, a reflection of the years she had spent living apart from them. The reunion was far from the romanticized images often portrayed in movies. It was awkward, tense, and raw. There were tears, some of joy, some of sorrow, some of anger. The eldest child, who had spent countless nights wondering if they had done something wrong, struggled to voice the emotions that had been simmering for decades. The youngest, who had always clung to hope, could barely speak, overcome by disbelief and emotion. Michelle's voice, when she finally spoke, trembled with a mixture of relief and guilt. "I never wanted to leave you," she said, her words fragile yet determined. "I was scared. I didn't know how to come back. I thought leaving would protect you from me, from the mess I'd become." The confession, simple as it seemed, carried the weight of decades. Every word was a testament to the human complexity behind her disappearance. The authorities had initially approached the situation cautiously. They had no reason to suspect foul play in Michelle's absence, but the circumstances demanded thorough investigation. Interviews, background checks, and verification of her identity were conducted meticulously. Once confirmed, law enforcement handed her back to the family, leaving them to navigate the emotional fallout in private. The community of Eden reacted in waves, from disbelief to fascination. Social media buzzed with stories of the long-lost mother who had returned, rekindling memories and speculation. Local news outlets ran interviews, revisiting the cold case files that had lain dormant for years. Conversations in grocery stores, cafes, and schools now revolved around one question: why did she leave? As the Smith family grappled with their emotions, the question that had haunted them for years, why, began to take shape. Michelle's explanation was layered. She spoke of personal struggles, of fear, of a sense of being overwhelmed by circumstances that seemed insurmountable. She had felt trapped, suffocated by expectations and responsibilities, and had believed that disappearing was the only way to regain a semblance of control. Psychologists analyzing cases like Michelle's emphasize the rarity and complexity of voluntary disappearances. Most adults who vanish do so under extreme psychological strain. Some are escaping danger. Others, like Michelle, are fleeing emotional turmoil or mental health crises. The long-term absence, however, creates lasting trauma for those left behind. Children internalize feelings of abandonment, develop trust issues, and carry grief that is compounded by the uncertainty of their parents' fate. For the Smith children, this analysis was more than academic. It was deeply personal. They had spent years oscillating between hope and despair, crafting scenarios of reconciliation and imagining ways their mother might have suffered. Now, faced with her presence, the raw reality of her choices collided with the idealized version of the mother they had carried in their hearts. Family therapy became an immediate priority. The sessions were intense, often bringing buried emotions to the surface. Questions that had been suppressed for years demanded answers. Why did you leave without a word? Did you think of us every day? Were you afraid we wouldn't forgive you? Michelle answered with honesty, though some truths were difficult for her to articulate. She admitted to fear. Fear of judgment, fear of failing as a mother, fear of the life she had left behind. She expressed regret, though she also conveyed that the absence had been a coping mechanism, a flawed attempt at survival. As the family worked to rebuild connections, small moments became monumental. Shared meals, long conversations, and even quiet silences held significance. Each interaction was a step toward reconciliation, a chance to stitch together the fragmented tapestry of their lives. Yet, the path was far from linear. Anger and hurt would flare, tears would flow unbidden, and doubts would linger. Rebuilding trust after a 24-year absence is not a single act but a prolonged, painstaking process. Meanwhile, the broader community remained captivated by the story. Local newspapers revisited the case, highlighting the resilience of the children and the mystery of the mother who had disappeared. Social media posts recounted the decades of waiting, the unanswered questions, and the emotional reunion. Experts were interviewed, providing context about long-term disappearances and their psychological ramifications. Each piece of coverage fueled curiosity, engagement, and conversation. The story also drew attention from true crime enthusiasts and content creators, eager to explore the dynamics of a disappearance that had spanned a quarter century. Videos analyzing the case, interviews with family members, and retrospectives on the investigation flooded platforms, amplifying the emotional resonance of the narrative. In many ways, Michelle's return reignited the story she had left behind, offering both closure and renewed intrigue. As Michelle began reintegration into her family life, she also faced the challenge of reconciling with herself. The years she spent in isolation had shaped her identity, forged a life that was both separate from and connected to her past. She grappled with guilt, self-doubt, and the lingering effects of fear that had propelled her initial disappearance. Her journey was not just about reuniting with her children but understanding the consequences of her choices and navigating the delicate process of forgiveness, both from others and herself. Therapists emphasize that families experiencing long-term absence must balance empathy with accountability. Children may feel abandoned, and parents who return must acknowledge the impact of their actions. In Michelle's case, this meant candid conversations, patient rebuilding of relationships, and recognition of the emotional scars left behind. Progress was gradual, sometimes imperceptible, yet each small victory, a shared laugh, a hug, a moment of understanding, marked significant healing. The media spotlight also raised ethical questions. While the story was compelling, the intense public scrutiny risked exacerbating family trauma. Experts cautioned against sensationalism, highlighting the need for respectful storytelling that centers the lived experiences of those most affected. For the Smiths, this balance was delicate. They wanted to share their journey, to honor their pain and resilience, while also protecting their privacy and emotional well-being. As the weeks passed, Michelle's presence began to normalize within the family, though shadows of the past remained. The children, now adults, navigated complex emotions, relief tempered by lingering anger, joy mixed with sorrow, hope intertwined with caution. The absence had left an indelible mark, shaping their identities and relationships in profound ways. Reconciliation did not erase the past. It required acknowledging it, confronting it, and integrating it into the ongoing narrative of their lives. The psychological toll of her disappearance also manifested in subtle ways. The children reported moments of anxiety, flashbacks of childhood events, and recurring questions about trust and stability. Therapy sessions explored these reactions, helping them understand that trauma does not vanish with physical presence. Emotional healing, experts emphasized, is a marathon, not a sprint. Michelle herself faced challenges reintegrating into a life that had continued without her. Simple routines, grocery shopping, attending community events, reconnecting with old friends, carried emotional weight. She encountered mixed reactions from neighbors, some welcoming, others skeptical or judgmental. The process required patience, humility, and a willingness to confront the long-term consequences of her absence. Amid these personal dynamics, the town of Eden reflected on the broader implications of the case. Local authorities reviewed cold case protocols, community organizations offered support to families experiencing long-term absence, and schools incorporated lessons on emotional resilience and coping strategies. Michelle's story became more than a singular event. It evolved into a touchstone for discussions about mental health, family dynamics, and community responsibility. The story also highlighted the remarkable role of modern technology in resolving cold cases. DNA genealogy, public records analysis, and improved investigative techniques proved instrumental in locating Michelle. Experts noted that such tools, when applied responsibly, can offer closure to families and communities long haunted by unanswered questions. In this sense, Michelle's return was not only a personal resolution but also a testament to the evolving capabilities of law enforcement and forensic science. Yet, even with her presence restored, questions lingered. Why did Michelle leave without explanation? What internal struggles had driven her to such extreme measures? Could the family ever fully forgive her? These questions, complex and layered, underscored the reality that even miraculous reunions carry nuances and unresolved tensions. True closure, psychologists note, is often a process rather than a moment. For the Smith children, life entered a new chapter. They celebrated milestones with Michelle by their side, shared laughter and tears, and began constructing memories that had been absent for decades. Yet, the experience left an indelible imprint, shaping their perspectives on family, resilience, and human vulnerability. The reunion did not erase the past. It provided a framework to integrate it, to honor both loss and recovery. The story of Michelle Hundley Smith also resonated beyond Eden. Audiences across the country connected with the universal themes of loss, hope, and reconciliation. Her journey illuminated the human capacity for endurance, the complexities of familial bonds, and the profound consequences of absence. As media coverage expanded, Michelle's experience became both a cautionary tale and a story of survival, inspiring discussions on mental health, parental responsibility, and the ethics of storytelling. As weeks turned into months, the Smith family continued to navigate the delicate balance of rebuilding and reflection. Every interaction with Michelle was a negotiation between past pain and present possibility. Conversations revisited old memories, explored new dynamics, and sought understanding without erasing the reality of what had been lost. Experts highlight that reintegration after long-term absence is not merely about restoring relationships but about redefining identity, both individually and collectively. For Michelle, this meant reconciling her past choices with her current desires. For her children, it involved accepting the mother who returned, recognizing her humanity, and integrating her into a life that had long continued in her absence. Ultimately, The story of Michelle Hundley Smith stands as a testament to human complexity, resilience, and the enduring power of hope. Her disappearance and return underscore the fragility of life, the consequences of choices made under duress, and the profound ways in which absence shapes those left behind. It reminds us that life is rarely simple, that forgiveness is a journey, and that the human heart is capable of enduring, adapting, and, sometimes, healing in ways that defy expectation. Michelle is back, but the journey is far from over. What truths remain hidden? What reconciliations are still required? And what will the future hold for a family fractured and reshaped by 24 years of absence? Michelle Hundley Smith's story isn't just about a disappearance. It's about decades of unanswered questions, heartbreak, and the incredible journey of a family torn apart and finally reunited. Subscribe now and stay with us as we reveal every detail, every secret, and every shocking twist that you won't find anywhere else. Don't miss a single chapter of this unforgettable story, and many other stories.